Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the We Are Not Lonely podcast. This is episode 14, and I'm going to be doing it by myself because Leo has things to do. So, I've been wondering what I wanted to talk about this podcast for a long time, and I've decided to talk about money. The first reason I want to talk about this is they say that you attract whatever you talk about a lot in your life, and I guess money is something everybody could use a lot more of. And the second reason that I decided to do this was over the weekend I met an acquaintance, and I think this is a sort of an experience that is universal for most people of my generation, or at least those of the middle class in particular. This inability to handle money. Now, I would say that this is something that is a failure on the part of our education system, because this is one of the most necessary things that a person should know about, considering the fact that we live in a capitalistic society and that the base currency is money, essentially, right? Everything is predicated on the importance of money, and we live our lives chasing it. So considering all of this, wouldn't it be in the best interests of the society, so to speak, to educate its folk on the importance of the basics at least, of how to manage money? Well, unfortunately, apart from a few specific areas, you don't really get this exposure. For example, now I'm just going to give you a bit of a background as to why I'm talking about this and my qualifications on the subject. I don't work in the field of finance, but I did complete my MBA in it, all right? And considering the fact that everybody needs money to live, I've spent quite a bit of time reading about it, and I've been trying to distill all of that. I will definitely say that, there's a lot of gaps in my knowledge, but I'm actively working to fill it. So, an approach, and I think this would be a good approach for the rest of the podcast as well, is to take what is useful, absorb what is useful, throw away that which is not. Take in what is useful to you and just discard the rest. Okay. And I think that's a good mindset to have going into anything. Take in what is specifically useful to you, adapt it, mold it into your into the skill set that you already have, adapt it into your skill set, and then just discard the rest. I think a similar quote was said by Bruce Lee, and yeah. Anyway, yeah, so there's a very huge issue with modern education where they don't really talk about the most important thing unless you're in that particular field, which is a big failure, I would say. Like I was saying, I met a friend recently and an acquaintance recently, and he had issues with money, and I think this is sort of common for most people who get their first job straight out of their college, and they have no idea on how to make things last, right? Because you have a monthly salary, and I don't know who said this. I will put this in the description if I do find out, but one of the most addictive things is a monthly salary. The other is cocaine. Right. The issue primarily is that since people don't know how to use money, they end up living paycheck to paycheck. And if they stop working, this is for the vast majority of people, if they stop working for a weekend, for a couple of months, they need to keep working, or they have nothing, they can't do anything. They're essentially one bad day away from being absolutely broke. I think this applies to a vast majority of people, because a similar story has been told from the ages. Now, back in the day when I first began my entire productivity journey, I would begin my day by listening to this half an hour thing by this half an hour summary of a book, I believe, called The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. He talks about a lot of things, but one of the things that stuck with me is now obviously there's a vast generalization going on here, and he's talking about something from the past. He talks about, like, you take 100 people of the same age who go to school, and you ask them if they want to succeed in life, and every single one of them says that they want to succeed in life, but at the end of it, like, only five will be rich. uh, I think, like, another five will be financially independent. Some of them will they be retired, but the vast majority, essentially, and this is what I want you to take away from this, is that the vast majority is going to be broke, right? And I think this is something that everybody faces. They live paycheck to paycheck to paycheck, and our auditors don't particularly now. Technically, they report to the government. They don't give you the secrets as to, why don't you buy a house? It'll help you shave off a few points. You can do this for your income tax. You can reduce income tax by owning a house, right? But they don't tell you that it's better if you own property that you can rent out. A house doesn't really, it's not an asset in the classical sense, and it doesn't give you income, right? Now, I've skipped the gun a little bit, but that's something that I learned from Rich Dad Poor Dad. Now, remember when I said that I studied finance and MBA in finance. I learned about assets and all of this, but I learned about this from the perspective of running a business, right? Personal finance, we did have a couple of classes, but nothing was really, shall we say, formalized. We had a class on investment, we had how to invest, portfolio management, we had all of these. But it was entirely, now this is another issue of the academic thing, like, it was entirely too academic. You couldn't really see it materializing, unless you go into, now, the amount of detail that they went to into portfolio management in the portfolio management class. Now, you wouldn't really need to analyze that unless you're handling your finances by yourself, and most people don't even think about investment. Again and again, I seem to go off and off the topic, but let me just, essentially, like, modern education is not really teaching us the best things about how to manage money. And I learned a great deal more about money and how to handle my finances by doing it myself. Okay? And I think a lot of people speak about this as well. For example, Naval, Ravikant, which I will talk about later on in the podcast. Naval Ravikant, he's a multimillionaire. He's an investor, and he was, in his own words, he was a broke guy from Mumbai, and he shifted to America and he made it. He became a multimillionaire. I think his net worth is like easily 60, 70 million dollars. Yeah. So, and he says that if he can do it, then basically anybody can, right? Anyway, so apart from my finance education, and I've done an MBA in finance, so I know some of the things that I'm talking about. Apart from that, I've been doing a great deal of reading, and I'm going to talk about a couple of the books that really changed my perspective on this entire thing. And as I go through them, like, I'll talk about a couple of things that really stuck with me, right? The first book that I read on this topic, on finance, on particularly personal finance, was a book by Robert Kiyosaki. It was called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And honestly, this book was a game changer. These days, I seem to have a really high standard for the kind of books I've read, because early on, some of the books that I've read were mind-changing, and I pretty much expect every book to have those kind of ideas, or I put the, especially non-fiction books, I expect them to have mind-changing, jaw-dropping revelations. Otherwise, I look at it as, yeah, okay, that was a good book, but, it didn't really change too much of how I view the world, right? some of the books that had this effect on me, one of them was Rich Dad Poor Dad, obviously. Another of them was Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I hope I got that right. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. So, Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, he's a really good author. Now, personally, he's got a lot of issues. The way I see it, the way I've understood it is that he's gotten involved in a bunch of MLMs, multi-level marketing scams, and so on and so forth. But I will still say this, that the wisdom, the information, the knowledge contained in those books are timeless. All right, and if you really want to get a start in understanding this entire finance game, I would highly recommend you get that. All right, so Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Another book that really changed the way I look at all of this was The Psychology of Money. Now, where Rich Dad Poor Dad is like, it's essentially it's a personal story, right? He's talking about the differences in the mindset of a person, of his so-called rich dad and the poor dad. The two really cool characters. Rich dad represents somebody who is into business, and the poor dad was a middle-class professor, and he was educating the reader about the differences in mindset between essentially what was a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, essentially what is an entrepreneur and the middle class mindset, right? The rich versus the poor, the difference between the rich and the poor, the way we think, essentially. Uh, yeah, so there's a lot of really intense information from that particular book. One of the things now, two things that really stuck with me, and I'll just mention them, is the way you decide what is what is an asset, and what is not, right? Essentially, assets should appreciate in value, one, and two, bring you some sort of an income. Now, if it's appreciating in value, then what it does is you can eventually sell that asset and realize the long-term capital gains. If it doesn't, it should be bringing you some sort of an income. All right, and if it doesn't fit either of these criteria, then they're technically not an asset. And moreover, if it's taking money from your pocket, if more and more money is going from your pocket into that so-called asset, imagine me doing these finger quotes in the air quotes. If more and more money is flowing from your pockets into maintaining this asset, it is no longer an asset in the financial sense. It's a liability. I was gonna bust out the F bomb. Right, now, there are two things that qualify for this particular definition, one of which is a car. Now, if you look at the traditional sense of a car, it does appear in the asset side of a balance sheet. But let's look at it from a better perspective, right? A car is one of the worst assets you can have. Again, picture me, whenever I say asset in respect to car, picture me doing quotes with a really sarcastic smile on my face. Now, the reason is that a car depreciates the moment you drive it off the freaking uh, purchasing area. Like, you take it from the showroom, you drive it off, it changes hands, you sign on the dotted line, it immediately loses a chunk of its value, right? It depreciates the moment it is owned, all right, and it continues to depreciate, right? So and it requires a huge amount of money. You're spending a lot of money to maintain the car. You have to spend to run the car. I mean, those are expenses that come with the car, but you have to spend on it, and it's always dropping in value, right? To maintain the vehicle, you have to spend on services, and if you don't, it essentially loses its value a lot faster, right? So in that sense, a car, and I love saying this, a car is a liability masquerading as an asset. Now, I just want to go off topic with a small story about the difference in the way that I think, right? Back in the day, I used to think wealth meant a big house, nice fancy car, and lots of money, right? This was when I was young, and I had this A lot of it changed when I started doing my goals changed, the way my outlook on life changed, and I no longer considered those important. But up to a large part of my life, that was like, a goal. I wanted to have a nice fancy, like a BMW or a Mark or something like that, a nice fancy house. Now I still want that nice fancy house, but I understand that if I'm living in it, it's not an asset, right? It's not generating income. So that's the second thing I wanted to go to talk about. So number one, a car is not an asset unless it's earning you money. In which case, like, you buy a car and you rent it out to Uber, you get a driver or something, and it brings you a net income at the end of the day. Net income. You're not getting a net fucking loss. That's important. Moving on. So unless you rent it out to Uber or something and you're getting income, a car is not an asset. It's a liability masquerading as an asset. Please understand this, all right? A lot of people get into this trap and immediately buy a car just to realize that they're gonna have to pay the EMI on it for fucking years, dude. And yeah, just take a cab or the bus, dude. Just take a freaking bus, depending on your time and your money. Yeah. Moving on. Second thing. The second thing is a house. Now, in India particularly, we have this thing, the Holy Trinity, roti, kapda, makan, right? So that's what every person looks to get. Roti is like food. These are the basic necessities, they say. You aim for food. Kapda is like clothes, and makan is like property, land, essentially meaning a house. So this is the Holy Trinity of the aspirations that are lower middle class and the poor, pretty much everybody who is aspiring to get comfortable. This is what they aspire to. This means wealth. This means, wealth means better roti, better kapda, better makan. Essentially, basics are roti, kapda, makan, and like if you're rich, that means instead of eating like small, like instead of eating dal and roti, you're eating butter naan and like paneer butter masala, or you're eating pizza, something fancy, just like better food, better clothes. Instead of wearing like off-brand stuff, you're wearing Gucci, Armani, and that's why a lot of Indians in particular fall into this name brand crap, right? And makan, obviously, bigger house, better house is equal to more wealth. It's yeah. So this is essentially the mindset of a vast majority of people. Moving on, talking about a house, again, like we can apply a lot of the things to the house as well. The only thing is that generally houses don't particularly depreciate in value because the land value in most countries is pretty much always appreciating. So eventually, if you sell it, you can realize the gains on that. That's the long-term capital gains from the perspective of taxation. But you're not earning any revenue, So there's that. And pretty much people don't buy houses to sell it in a couple of months. They buy it to stay in it, or they don't construct a house to sell it. So in that way as well, it's not technically an asset. It does still appear on the asset side in your balance sheet, and you can mortgage it. I mean, you can leverage it to get more credit in a bank. If you want to take a loan, you can give it. But yeah, so that's the other thing. Unless it's earning you income, it's not an asset, right? So by this definition, what is an asset? You would get things like stocks, shares. That's stock slash shares, bonds. A house you could term as an investment. A car is definitely not an investment. Anyway, I got a little caught up in that. That's some of the lessons from Rich Dad Poor Dad. I would highly suggest you check it out. One hell of a book. Really changed the way I view money. It completely changed the foundations of my perspective on finances and wealth and entrepreneurship. Yep. Now, moving on, there's another book called The Psychology of Money, which I read quite recently, actually. Rich Dad Poor Dad was quite a few years ago. The Psychology of Money was a lot more recent. I kept seeing it on Instagram, so I finally caved and decided to check it out. So, yeah. I actually, so what happened was after I did this entire thing, I've become a lot more, shall we say shall we say, disciplined in my approach to journaling. So what I've been doing ever since this year is every time I complete a book, I write like a small review on it. So I'm just looking at my review on the psychology of money, and I'm going to read out a little bit, right? And I quote, "This is a particularly practical book, particularly to understand how people approach the subject of money. It is primarily psychology based, as in it uses psychology to understand how people make financial decisions. This is essentially the difference between between the economist view of the world and how the normal person views the world. Because pure rational thought is impractical most times. It is better. It's definitely better than being controlled by emotions, but it isn't. It's not like uh, I'm just moving on. Like, pure rational thought is very difficult, right? To be because we are humans and we do get swayed by emotions. So the idea behind the psychology of money is instead of being purely rational or being purely emotional, be reasonable. That's the entire thing. So I've written down the entire thing. Like, there are several chapters. There's an introduction talking about how people handle money and what happened to their fortunes towards the end of their lives. And I think apart from the entire thing, right, this one thing, no one's crazy. This had a profound impact on the way I viewed things, right? So this entire chapter is talking about how everybody has different goals financially, and from that perspective, their financial decisions make perfect sense, right? I'm sure, like, Naval and all would definitely disagree with this, but this is about reasonable things. Everybody has an idea now. From their point of view, they might be right. It seems reasonable to be doing what they're doing, but if you look at it from a more rational perspective, it isn't. Then he talks about luck and risk, managing greed. Basically everybody talks about handling risk, because the more they always say higher the risk, higher the return, but they fail to mention that higher the risk, higher the chances of losing everything that you've put in. They forget to mention that. They conveniently forget to mention that. Moving on. The Pareto principle, compounding. The difference between getting wealthy and staying wealthy. Staying wealthy is about being frugal and paranoid and avoiding ruin at all costs. Just a few things that really stuck with me. I summarized an entire chapter in a couple of lines, right? Like everywhere I go, right, there's this another chapter called Tails You Win, Pareto Principle. The biggest returns you get are from a small number of efforts. Hence, make a wide number of attempts and keep trying, and then sometimes you can win unexpectedly. Just keep track of what seems to give you the most results and repeat those actions. And this is something I need to keep reminding myself, right? Essentially, the Pareto principle, or the Matthew principle as it is sometimes called, from those that have nothing, everything will be taken away, and to those that have everything, more will be given. So essentially, it's like the principle behind a lot of things. It's not just financial. It explains why the rich get richer. It explains why the most stars have some of the stars have most of the mass, the highest number of mass. And it also explains why in every single company, a small number of employees are driving the maximum amount of results. Right? Okay. Anyway, I'm just gonna go through this and see what else I found really thoughtful. Again, I've been seeing this for a really long time, ever since the podcast began, but there's construction happening right next to my house, and that's the weird, annoying sound that you keep hearing. Anyway, this is, I think, the most important thing, dude. Wealth is what you don't see. Spending money to show your money off is the fastest way to have none. Wealth is a bunch of assets working away, earning you money while you sleep. You don't become a millionaire just to spend $1 million, because Yeah, yeah, right. Like everybody thinks that they want to become a millionaire so that they can spend $1 million, but that's the fastest way to end up being flat out fucking broke. Oh man, that's the yeah. So yeah, dude, like these are some of the things I learned from this. There's a lot more from here, but I'm not gonna be going into that. So when this friend like I need a better way to handle my money, I just like went on like a 20-minute monologue, and it seemed that the things that I was telling him made a lot of sense to him, and some of the things I all of the things that I mentioned were things that I had learned over the years from my huge amount of freaking experience in this particular chapter. Um, Especially in the last couple of years where I've been learning to handle my own finances, etc., etc. Right? So, another important book is that I read quite recently again was 13 Steps to Bloody Good Wealth. Now, I think that was last month. I don't know if I'll be able to find it. It was sometime towards the end. Now, this was it was a book written by an Indian author, and the pretty cool thing was that he literally lists 13 steps that you can follow to build incredible wealth. And I'm just gonna say it, dude. Like it was, yeah, it was pretty legit. So I'm just gonna read out the things, right? Money is a lifelong game that adults like to play. It is the most powerful concept to grip the human consciousness. It is power, freedom, a cushion, the root of all evil, and the sum of all blessings. Now, the only thing that money gives you is the freedom. Is it essentially gives you freedom to one, not worry about money, and two, to pursue your life's ambitions. Essentially, money equals freedom. Now, the important thing is wealth. Point five: wealth accrues by pursuing your passion and by providing value. Quantify six. You need to quantify your goals if you need to get. Now these are literal concrete steps. The first five were about the first 5 points. Those are the first five steps. Were basically things that you needed to wrap your mind around. You need to understand the concept of money if you are to get any good at having it, right? So point six onwards, step six onwards, it becomes more concrete, and the author gives a lot more things on. He gives you a lot more tips on how to accrue wealth, right? Six, quantify your goals, divide them into short term, medium, and long term, and that is your financial goals. Seven, remember that the goal of wealth is to beat inflation. Eight, budgeting is as important as investing. Doesn't mean that you penny pinch. It just means that you have a macro understanding of where your money is going. I know several people who raise themselves out of poverty but are hanging by a thread because they don't necessarily it's like you save a penny, lose a pound, that kind of a mindset. You handle the small things but you forget to take care of the big things. Like this is basically the Pareto principle all over again. And this is I'm just gonna say this is a mindset that particularly the middle class tend to have. They focus on the wrong thing, right? Let me explain what I mean by that. I spoke about the Pareto principle, where 20% of things, for example, if it's regarding a business, in a company, 20% of the employees, that is a small majority. These numbers are arbitrary, but generally a small minority provides the vast majority of results, right? Now the problem with, and this is true everywhere, this is like a people generally think that everything is normally distributed. They aren't. There are quite a few things that are basically distributed according to the Pareto principle, right? And I'm pretty sure like finance is one of them. All right, and here's my thing: you need to focus on the things that give you the most benefit. All right, by which I mean, this dude spoke about budgeting, right? And he spoke about penny pinching. A penny pinching is an example of where you look at the small things and you lose sight of the big picture, right? You look at saving a penny here, a penny there, but you forget, you overlook the pounds that are slipping out of your pocket because you're focused on the wrong thing. And that is focusing on the vast majority of doing the vast majority of things that are giving you very little in value. And it's important that everybody learns to identify this, right? For example, like one of the things I spoke about to my friend was like, dude, like the first step you need to do, he came to me telling me that, like, I get paid, I get 40K, and then like 10 days later I have barely 2K left, man. I don't know where it's gone. So my first advice to him was like, keep track of what you're spending on. First step is, every time you're spending, write it down so you know at the end of the month where your money is going. That's step one. Step two after that would be to be like, start budgeting. You look at the expenses that you look at where your money is going and think about places where you can reduce it realistically, right? For example, if you're earning like 40-50K a month and you're spending 30K on clothes, I would say that's a bit much. 30K per month on clothes is a bit much, right? So probably reduce that, I don't know, right? So yeah, so that's the thing. Don't penny pinch, just think. Number 9, create additional income streams. This is a big thing, and this is everywhere, right? Everywhere. Robert Kiyosaki talks about this. I think I found, pretty much everything in the cash flow quadrant, Rich Dad Poor Dad. Everyone speaks about having more than one source of income. It's vital to becoming wealthy, and I will have a separate topic about that, but I don't think in that particular area, I don't think I'm particularly qualified because, I'm still working on developing multiple income streams, so I don't want to talk about that. But I will say that it's very important and it's ideal to know that you're not limited to a single source of income, and that's very freeing. Okay, moving on. Compounding is the eighth wonder. Essentially, consistently invest over many years and you will end up building wealth. There's a story of a janitor that I think I read in this particular book where at the end of his life he had millions of dollars. Now compare that to several multi-millionaires who ended up broke because they didn't know what the hell they were doing. They just spent everything they had, right? Mismanaged all of their wealth. Anyway, moving on. This is basically the principle behind systematic investment plans, right? Where you take a small amount of money, you put it into this plan, and a fund manager uses that to buy a bunch of things. And over the years, as you keep doing it, they they love saying this. Every single person who's into finance, hardcore finance person, will tell you that compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. I've heard this so many times, and I agree. I freaking agree with this shit. Alright, making small, and this is basically the compound effect. Now, they say that compounding is the eighth wonder. It's not, it doesn't just apply to finance. That's the best part, right? It applies to pretty much everything, and that's what makes habits so freaking that's the benefit of constantly repeating certain habits, right? For example, I believe Jerry Seinfeld, Jerry, I think I got his name right. The dude talks about how he would write a joke every single day, and he would have like a huge calendar that represented the days that he has written a joke, and he would, every time he'd look at it, he'd be, maybe not today, maybe I don't write a joke today, and then he looks at the progress that he's made, the huge freaking chart of X's that represent the number of continuous days that he's been doing this habit, and he just continues to do this. So consistency, right? Everybody talks about this. This is important not just here. It's not just important in finance. It's not just important in finance and building wealth, etc. It's important everywhere in life. If you want to have good habits, a good, healthy life, If you want to have good habits, essentially you need to be consistent at whatever it is you're doing. If you want to have results, be consistent at what you're doing. Consistency is key. Yeah, and you need but it does take a huge amount of discipline. Okay, spend money to acquire assets that can generate cash flow. Yeah, this shit is this shit. Yeah, this shit is legit, dude. This shit is legit. This is what you need to do. These are actually a bunch of things that I've just written down. These are not the actual steps. My bad. The steps are on the next page. I've just been going on and on and on about what the book contains, right? Spend money to acquire assets that can generate cash flow. This is the same thing that Robert Kiyosaki has said. And actually, in this book, this dude mentions that Robert Kiyosaki was a huge influence on his mindset. So that's the freaking effect of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad. Yeah, so definitely give it a read if you're interested in this whole world of finance. All right, now moving on. This is just me freaking pitching for like an hour, dude. I'm gonna keep it short, like maybe 45 minutes this time, yeah? Because I understand that finance is a very dry topic and not everybody has a stomach for it, but considering that we're in a capitalistic society, I think it would be a little beneficial for anybody to learn about money and how to handle it. I think it's cool. I think it's really cool. Also, like I'm doing this whole thing where I, like you tend to attract what you talk about. Guess what I just did? I have an entire podcast episode dedicated to wealth creation and money. So you know what I'm attracting? Get that bread. Sheesh. Yeah, sorry about that. I just had to meme. Anyway, yes. I think the last one. Oh, wait, I will talk about two things, right? Two things. There's a book. Okay. There's a book called the Naval, the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, and it ties into the next thing that I'm going to talk about. They've collected everything that Naval has spoken about in a particular podcast dedicated to wealth, and they've put it in book form, right? So at a point in time, Naval Ravikant had this tweet storm where he'd put out ideas, basically a philosophy, his philosophy that he's developed over the years that took him from being a broke dude in Mumbai, or I don't know if it was Delhi, a broke dude from India to a really successful multimillionaire, right? So that's one, and so that's basically from the podcast. So what he did was he put out a tweet storm on how to get rich. And Naval talks about this in the podcast. Naval talks about this in the podcast as well. He says that it's not so much about how to get rich, it's about how to get wealthy, right? But how to get rich is it's attention grabbing. And so it's a 4-hour long podcast. It's going to be difficult for me to talk about pretty much everything. I can't summarize everything, all the wisdom that Naval has in about 10 minutes. It's difficult, right? But I will say this: definitely check it out. Whenever I need to draw, some of the things that I would do, and I've been doing this for quite a while actually. Whenever I had to draw, whenever I had to do something that didn't require my brain to consider words in the activity that I was doing. For example, if I was editing a video or editing something, like not a book, but if I was drawing, I would just put on the Naval Ravikant podcast, right? And this dude has a lot of good points. Now, I haven't read the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, but I understand that it's essentially whatever he's spoken about in the How to Get Rich tweet storm that's been collected in the 4-hour megasode about how to get rich, right? So I would definitely recommend listening to that podcast and checking out that if you're serious about building wealth. And I think the entire thing, right, is that One of the things that really stuck with me is that Naval really believes in his heart that wealth is not a zero sum game. Now, what is a zero sum game? It's a concept from game theory where, in order to win, there must be a loser. In order for there to be a winner, there must be a loser, right? But Naval believes that wealth does not have to be zero sum game. He truly believes, and he talks about this at every point of time, which is why it's really cool, right? He's actually rich, and he's doing this podcast as a way. He's doing all of these podcasts as a way to, and he's made his wealth elsewhere, and he's doing all of this as a way to disseminate his wealth. No, not his wealth. Sorry, to spread his knowledge, right? Now the important thing is, and you need to remember this, all right, because there's a lot of sources on the internet that will say how to get rich and give you a bunch of like shitty ideas. Maybe some of them might have good ideas, and then at the end of it they'd say something like, oh, if you want to get the whole thing, why don't you sign up for my workshop at the end? And at the end of the workshop, what they do is they say, oh, we have a special course, and they're selling a special course that's like, that's supposed to be like $1,000, but for you at this moment, because you watched the entire workshop, they'll give it to you for like $299 or some nonsense like that. I just want to say that there's a lot of fake gurus, so-called gurus on the internet, especially on YouTube. I almost fell for one of these myself, but I didn't because I was broke, right? And I wasn't the type, at that particular point in time, I had like severe social anxiety, and I wasn't about to go around and be like, hey, listen, I need to borrow some money so I can do this course. I didn't do that, thankfully. But I know several people that have done this, all right? Now, the person in particular was this semi-successful dude called Dan Lok. I don't know if he's still active on YouTube. Just give me a second. Let me just check that. Okay. So I'm checking out Dan Lok's podcast. I mean, sorry, not podcast. I'm checking out his YouTube channel. This dude's got a YouTube channel. And actually, that's where I found him first. He was doing a bunch of Wing Chun movements. Fuck this guy. Shut the fuck up, Dan Lok. He's got, in this particular video, the very first video that pops up as you go to his channel, he's got like 4.07 million subscribers. Alright. He's got this video, the 9 industries most likely to make you a millionaire, and he's got a bunch of Iron Man robots in the background. Now, like, the way I saw this shit, he's still on YouTube. He's still making money. He's doing this. Okay? Oh my god. This guy. Okay, so let me just explain what I'm talking about, right? So, Dan Lok is this internet YouTube guru. He had this course called High Ticket Closer, essentially teaching you how to sell, how to close a sale, right? How to take it from first meeting to successfully closing a sale. And he's got like a sort of a cult built around that entire thing. It's essentially a cult around his personality, and he's a fake internet guru. All right, a lot of people have come out talking about this entire cult. All right, and yeah, I almost fell into this fucking trap, dude. Thankfully, like it was around $200 odd, and at that time I was like, yeah, sketchy. I don't have the money, so I'm not gonna do this. And then, like a little while later, I found this video called "The Dark Side of Internet Gurus," which I will add a link to in the description. This dude talks about people who have no idea what they're talking about. So there's this guy called James Jenny, I believe, who talks about So this is essentially what Naval Ravikant talks about in his podcast as well. Now, when someone is giving you information on how to get wealthy, you need to look at where they're getting this information from and where their wealth has come from. All right. If that person has gotten wealthy by selling courses on how to get wealthy, that dude is not legit. You need to understand that, right? a lot of people, yeah, some of them. So essentially what they do is they sell you courses and mastermind programs, and they promise you freedom, financial freedom, living on the laptop lifestyle, and the possibility to travel around the world. Now the thing is, I think this might have started with the whole 4-hour work week thing, where now the 4-hour work week is legit. It's another book that I've read that really changed my mind on how we need to view the entire thing about money making, right? Because wealth is there to help you live what you dream about. Wealth is essentially freedom for you to live the life that you want. Whereas, okay, yep, my dude Andrew Kirby talks about this as well. Okay, I'm gonna have to look at these videos as well. Essentially, there's a toxic side to this which you need to be really careful about. If someone is selling you a course on how to get rich, that is highly suspect. Definitely look into where this dude's made his money. All right. If they're offering you a mentorship program, here's the thing about wealthy people. I've met quite a few in my own life, right? If they truly wanted to mentor somebody, I don't think they'd be taking money. Wealth, like especially on the thing about wealth and all of that, they have enough of it. It's not going to be like, okay, let me talk to you about this, dude. If for some reason you got Warren Buffett's interest, or Bill Gates's interest, right? And they see potential in you, and they said, you know what, like, I think you're cool. I want you to be my mentee, and I would like to be your mentor. Do you honestly think that Bill Gates is going to be like, hey, okay, so here's what you got to do, man. Send me $1,000 or sign up for my course and attend my live event, and we can consider you becoming a mentee. You think that's going to happen? Do you think that's going to happen? Like for real, dude? God damn, shut the fuck up with your delusions. Yes, so a lot of people, sorry about that. These people are essentially preying on the weak. Okay? They have identified what people want. They have identified their vulnerabilities. And they've decided that for some reason they're going to exploit those vulnerabilities and make money off of them. And generally the people that fall for this shit are not financially well off enough to be doing this kind of crap, which is why you see that people who fall for MLMs are mostly single mothers, people who aren't doing financially well. You lure them in with the promise of doing great, with great financial rewards, right? And then the fucking penny drops eventually. Yeah, so that got a little dark towards the end. Sorry about that. It's just that, like, I have very strong opinions on people. Considering the fact that I almost got caught lacking by Dan Locke. Piece of shit. Fucking asshole. I'm gonna have to edit that out. Anyway, yeah, so that's it for today, guys. Let me know what you think about this. I will link the books that I spoke about. Maybe I'll just add their names in the description. Yeah. Definitely check them out, especially if you're interested in learning about this. I would want this to become a thing, especially in schools and colleges, especially in areas that are not management related, because that's where, now look at it, like the highest paying jobs go to people from management, like IIM and all of that, IIT especially, yeah. So these are people that would definitely need to know how to manage the finances and etc. People like that. And more than that, like especially the people from a middle class family, man. And that's the vast majority, middle class and the poor. That's the vast majority of India, right? which is where I'm from, and I would like to do something. Shit, sorry about that. I'm gonna have to cut this bit out again. Anyway, my entire point is that you need to be careful when considering this topic. It seems kind of hypocritical to say this after I've just spent nearly 45 or 50 minutes talking about this entire topic, which is wealth. But just bear in mind, I'm putting this podcast out for free, and it's essentially what I've learned, what I've understood, my experiences, and sometimes, whenever Leo joins, our experiences on things. When it's me by myself, it's just like, I'm dropping wisdom pearls. Pearls of wisdom. Sometimes they're wasted on swine. That's an old adage from somewhere. I think it was from Hermetics, yeah. So, yeah, my point is, at the end of this, I am not selling you a fucking course, right? I'm not selling you a course on how to get rich in 27 days. None of that shit. Anyway, so let me know what you think about this. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. This is a very important topic for pretty much everybody, since we all are participant in a capitalistic society, and we need to use money in a better way to reach our goals, which is essentially live the life of our dreams. Anyway, yeah, so don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you liked it, leave a like. If you don't like it, leave a dislike, and maybe tell me why. Thanks, and again, this is Rudra from the We Are Not Lonely podcast. I will see you again next week. Ciao.